All right, welcome back, everybody, to the seventh week of Tech Bytes, the Python session. We are glad to have such a large audience today, and looks like we are getting the same people, which is awesome. Hopefully, learning some cool things, and which is why you're coming back. So, welcome back.
Welcome to week 7.
Yep, crazy. We got this week and next week more to go for this particular session, and then, as we discussed before, we will be transitioning to a different type of course as well. You guys already know who me and Andrew are, but just a refresher, my name is Rayan Siddiqui. I'm a rising senior at James D. Conant High School. I've made a dozen different websites, like to make apps for the App Store. You can check out more about me on my website at rayansiddiqui.com, and my partner Andrew.
You people know me as well. I am Andrew Choi. I code as well on the side. I illustrate also as a hobby. I'm particularly interested in computer graphics. I'm going to be a freshman soon at Purdue University. I've done quite a bit of projects as well. You can check them out at andrewchoi.info.
All right, so let's get into what we're going to be doing for the 7th week. Now, over the past 6 weeks, we've built up the fundamentals. We've talked about so many different concepts, from variables to loops to list. And we even got to put it all together for the past 2 to 3 weeks, in which we did a lot of big block coding projects like the higher lower game, the quiz game, for instance. But now it's time to move to the next level. And today we're going to be starting to make that transition to learning how to type that Python code. And look, so we have a lot of people from the JavaScript session. So it's going to be similar to that type of transition we're making in JavaScript curriculum, in the sense that we've learned how to do the block coding, but now it's time to apply those same skills, keep that same concept, but should just learn some different syntax and a little bit of a wording in order to be able to type it all out. And yeah, so without any further ado, let's move on to the next chapter.
All right, so the way we're going to actually go about teaching us about coding and typing, we're going to be doing this via examples. I believe we have around 3 examples. I don't have the slides on me. Could you check real quick, Brian?
Yeah, I believe you have 3, yes.
All right, so first off, we should talk about variables. Now, we're all interested about variables in the context of block coding, but here we have the actual typed out variant. Usually it's something on the lines of writing the variable name, you type it out, and after that you space equal sign, and then you assign the value to that variable. In this case, we have an example of variables using pizzas as a sort of grounded example. My pizzas, say you had 3 pizzas, and well, you wanted to know how many slices you can get out of pizza. Let's say you get 8 slices from an individual pizza. Well, we can calculate that with the variable my pizzas. We simply multiply it by 8. And just like that, we use variables to get out an answer, and that answer is 24. That's how many slices you would have if you had 3 pizzas. Notice how you could use the variable assignment by just writing out names and assigning with the equal sign. Should be pretty easy compared to JavaScript, and I think we'll see an example real quick of how it can get a little different than other languages. But going on to Rayan, could you get to example number 2?
Yeah, definitely. And a quick thing before we go, since we have so many people from the JavaScript session, notice the differences. When Andrew and I are going over different syntax for the wording of Python, notice the differences between Python and JavaScript. Like, as you can already see, we got one difference. In JavaScript, remember how we used to, in order to declare a variable, we had to do var, and whatever the name of the variable was equals a value? Well, Python makes it so much easier. You just simply type out the name of whatever variable you want and set it equal to whatever value you want. No need to add the prefix of var. So that's something, these little differences, they're really important. So be sure to, keep track of those, and in general, it's a nice tool to have.
Quick question from one of our attendees. What website will we use for typing out our code? Yes. We have it near the end of the presentation, and you will have access to the link very shortly.
Yep. Don't worry, we'll get some practice in today, so don't worry about that. All right, So now today, let's talk about the second typing concept, that being logic statements, aka if-else statements. Now, we've done a lot of if-else and logics in the block coding, and the concept is the same. That's one of the key things you guys got to remember when we're doing this when we're typing code. The concept does not change. All that's changing is the syntax. Essentially, we're just learning how to actually type it out. But the root concept of the fact that if statements are used to check if a statement is true, and then a certain piece of code will run, that stays the same. So always remember that that same idea will stay continuous, essentially. And here's some quick syntax. We'll obviously get into practicing this a later bit today, but notice how Python is different. All you have to do is do if whatever statement you're checking for. In this case, we're checking for if the number of slices of pizzas we have, the variable my slices, is greater than or equal to 100 slices. And then we just put a colon and then enter, tab usually, to format the code nicely so that it seems nicely formatted. And then we can run whatever piece of code you want, just like we would regularly do in the block code within that statement. Now, notice again the difference between Python and JavaScript. Remember, in JavaScript over the past 2 weeks when we've been doing block and typing code on JS Fiddle, remember when we're doing if statements, we usually do if, the same word, but there's a parentheses and the condition goes inside the parentheses, and there's usually brackets instead of colons. Well, on the other hand, in Python, Python is a bit easier, which is why this course is a bit more for the beginners, and we're learning the root and the fundamentals, which is why it's much easier to type out an if statement. Simply do if, whatever the condition is, a colon, and you're on your way.
All right. Here is a short comparison between two languages to give you a good idea of the differences between Python and other languages. We don't have JavaScript here, but it is really similar in the sense that it uses semicolons and brackets as well. Notice how in Rust code, don't worry about what the actual language is like, just try to see how it's sort of formatted. You see the brackets, and you see after the conditionals, you have to put those brackets instead of, say, in Python, where you have to use tabs, or I believe it's not new lines, right? It's like, indentations,
yeah,
to format your code, because languages like, say, Rust or JavaScript do not rely on those indentations. They rely purely. Sorry, question from Redima. What is differences with Python and JavaScript? I believe we went over that with the previous example, but like we are saying now, you can just replace Rust with JavaScript right now, and you'll get a good idea already. It is semicolons versus new lines, and brackets versus indentations. That's the sort of, I guess you could say, core to the differences between Python and other languages. It's about how you format and space out your code. Does that answer question? You are having trouble hearing me right now. Ryan, can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, I can hear you. Redima, try putting up the volume. Can you hear us now, Redima? Redima, if you would like, you can try leaving and joining back the session in case you're having any technical issues in terms of connectivity. Okay. Yeah, okay, your volume was low. Okay, that's great. All right, great. So let's continue.
Okay, let us continue. So as we were saying, Should we just like
Yeah.
go into detail more about number 3 or?
Yeah.
Okay, so as we were saying, the way the code is sort of formatted in something like JavaScript, you have semicolons and you use things like brackets. Notice the things that actually stay the same. You still use equal signs. You still assign variables using the variable name, equal sign, value, structure. But things like, say, how you declare a block or like a set of brackets. So not brackets. Hold on. It's like the name's like the curly brackets. Yeah, that is not what you do in Python. You use a colon, just a regular colon, and that's how you space it out. All right, let's move on to example number 4.
Yeah. One sec. What just happened?
I'm sorry, is there a problem?
Yeah. One sec. I hit the Q&A button on the slides.
All right, so like a fun example of how this actually applies to Python. This is something you can't do in Python. Here, the person is formatting his code using semicolons. And because the person formatting this code is using semicolons, he's able to essentially space out his code so that it is all in one donut-shaped image, as opposed to Python, where you are required to enter a new line instead of using a semicolon. And that is why someone is able to say, do this with a different language than Python. I'm not going to read the bottom half. You can read it in your own time.
Yep. No need to. This is just a fun example, guys. No need to actually. It's fine if you don't completely understand this part. All right, so we've learned 2 main concepts today, that being variables and logic statements. So what better way to see how they actually roll out than actually applying the skills to typing? So now, guys, it is time to head on over to our next website in the Python world to type code. Here is the link. This is a bit of a larger link. We'll drop it in the chat for you guys. Here you go. It should be available in the chat. And the Python 3 module should already be selected. We'll give you guys a couple minutes since we know this is a new website. Let us know when you are there, and then let's get started.
And just to clarify, that semicolon there, not at all necessary.
Yeah, I'll show you guys in a minute, actually. You guys get on the website. Yours does not look like that, really. Is it because potentially it's sized differently for demo? Ayush, Parul, Pranav, Ridhima, Shaurya, Vishnu, can you guys confirm once you guys on the website? Great. All right, so let's look at the difference, as Andrew was stating, of a semicolon being at the end of a statement to run. So right now, once we load in, we're able to see that there's a print statement. Now remember how in block coding we were able to print our variables, print statements out. This time we can do a similar thing and printing out whatever statement we want. So if I hit the execute button, this is how we will compile our code right here. We're able to see that the statement hello world is printed out. But if I take out the semicolon, what do you guys think is going to happen? Well, it is still going to print out hello world because, as Andrew was talking about earlier, Python does not require semicolons to be at the end of every line, unlike JavaScript and other languages, which makes it a bit more user-friendly and nice for starting to program. There are a bunch of ads in the right-hand column. If you hit execute, they should go away. If you hit execute once, run the code one time, they should go away.
As an alternative, if your browser supports ad block, it's recommended you install that.
Yeah. Great. All right. All right. So let's get started. And Andrew, should we talk about functions as well today?
Well, I don't think we've talked that much about how to do functions in the Python language because the block coding previously didn't support it. So how about we just do what we can right now and maybe introduce the functions if we have extra time.
Okay, sure. So we'll go into functions and the whole structuring next week of how to put code inside. But for today, I guess we will just put into use our variables and our logic statements. One quick second. All right, so let's get started by applying the skills we just learned, such as the variables and logic. And then, if we have time, we'll get into what we learned, like the functions and how to hold our code in a little bit. So let's get started right now. So how about we make we got something in chat. All right. So how about we make our first variable? So let's call it, what better way to call it than first variable? And we'll set it equal to, say, 10. Now remember, you could call this variable whatever you want, such as x, y, z. And once you assign a value to it, how about we go ahead and print it out just to see if we correctly assigned a value. And let's hit execute. And we're able to see that the value of our variable is printed out. Now, how about we try some basic logic statements, such as checking if the variable the value of our variable is larger than a number. Now, we've done many more complex examples of block coding, but right now let's start a bit simple. So let's type out our first logic statement. So let's say if the name of our variable, whatever you called it, we'll say if it's greater than or equal to, let's say, 5. We'll wait a quick second right here. Everybody catching up? Notice how you don't have to type this part out. I do not need these parentheses because this is not JavaScript. Remember, it's Python. So it's a bit easier to type our logic statements out. And remember, instead of the brackets, we need the colon. And there we go. Type that colon out. And then we're able to see that this online editor indents for us, which is very nice. And we don't have to manually hit the tab button 15 times. Now, how about we print something to make sure that our logic statement is working? So what we'll do is say we'll print your variable value is over 5. Now, there has to be another case, right? Like if this statement is not met, what should else happen? All right, let you guys catch up a quick second. So now we're able to check if the value of our variable is greater than 5. Then we print out, hey, the value of the variable is greater than 5. But what if it's not? Well, remember, logic, there's another statement we can use called the else. Then we simply just type out else, same thing, colon, enter, and then we'll print out a statement such as your variable value is less than 5. Now, if we go ahead and execute this code, we'll see that the statement, your variable value is over 5 is printed out. Because remember, the value of our variable right here is 10. And we're checking in the if statement, the logic statement, if the value of our variable is greater than 5. Now, that's a pretty basic example. Anybody have any questions, we'll be glad to answer them right now. All right, and how about we do a quick extension of this before we talk about another term, that being functions and applying them to typing code. Remember how in the block coding, we many times, like in our higher lower game, the quiz game, and the looping game, the looping concept game, we were able to get a value from the user and ask the user, hey, can you input a value? Well, let's try to type out something which would allow us to do the same. So how about we replace this value of our first variable with this syntax. So follow this. You type out input, parentheses, quotation mark, and then we'll say, what value do you want to store? And if I run this, oh, it does not have the editor, have the ability to. One second. Oh, that's weird. Okay, then I guess we'll hold off on that part for next week, grabbing an input. Not sure where you might have to switch to a different editor online because I believe the issue is it's not waiting for us to input a value. That's weird. Okay. Anyways, how about we learn how to actually organize this code and hold it in something we learned a couple of weeks ago called functions. So I'll transfer back to the slides really quickly. On to our fourth example. Andrew?
All right, so one last typed code example we have for you is functions. Now, we didn't quite do functions earlier with the Python block coding, but we do have it now in the form of typing, and here it is. Functions are formatted a lot like if statements. but instead of ifs, we have defs, which I actually don't know why it's called def, but we use it. So it means to define a function. So right now we have def, then we have a func name, just whatever function name you might think. In the example on the right, we actually have a type of function that simply greets the person you input the name into. So for instance, I write down def hello, hello being our function name, and name being our parameter for the function. Now, of course, I do something called string concatenation. If it's, I'm just making it so that the name variable is sort of embedded in that hello and exclamation mark there. Don't worry about that right now. But what is important is the output. When I call hello, that's how I call hello, by the way. Hello, parentheses, and put the parameter inside. We get the output hello George, and using that, functions can deliver that sort of varied output.
So how about we put this example into context? If we load up our website again. Now notice how this code doesn't really belong anywhere. It's just lonely. It's just disorganized. Well, functions in Python, they allow us to organize our code like they do in JavaScript. So remember how in JavaScript, in order to make a function, we specifically type out function and then the name of the function? Well, Python makes it much easier. We just do simply def space, we'll say check math, because we already got some code for that, and then start and end parentheses. And then remember, no brackets, we need a colon. And there we go. We have a function. Now, to make our lives a bit easier for this example, how about we copy this code and just drag it to down here. And please make sure that the indentations of your lines inside the function are correct to make sure that all the code is being executed inside the function. So they should all be this first indentation like that. That was a lot of steps, so if you have any questions, let us know. All right, so it looks like we're doing good. Now, if I run and execute this program, nothing is being printed out. That's weird. Oh, well, the reason for that is because in Python, since we're not actually using like another library like Hinter or something of that sort to connect our function to a button, we have to call our function in some way so that the computer knows to execute the code inside of the function. The way we do such in Python is simply just write the function name out. So once we've written the function name, below, outside of the indentations of the function, so notice how this is way far from the actual function inside the function. Once we have that, we simply execute, and our function will work. And we see that your variable value is over 5 is printed out. All in all, showing us that the organization of our code and how we can use functions and actually apply them now. Because in block coding, we don't really need them, but in typing code, as we'll learn even more next week, holding our code inside function is vital and is a very important step in programming.
All right, for next week, we are going to start transitioning to typing even more code. Specifically, we're going to extend our typing knowledge into the realm of loops, arrays, and lists.
Yep. So Hopefully you've been having a good time. Hopefully, this transition has been going smoothly. As always, you can find our old videos on the YouTube channel. If you have any questions or you forgot what something means, the terminology or an example, everything will be, as usual, posted on the Google Classroom with all the daily updates and the material needed, along with the direct links to our old sessions YouTube videos. As always, guys, I hope that you guys enjoyed and had a good time, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. See ya.
Thank you for coming.